Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sorting Thoughts podcast. This is your host, Floren. I hope you guys are doing good. I personally am doing really good. I have been really productive these past few days, and I'm very proud of myself for that. But today's episode is mainly going to be about reviewing the latest films that I have seen. And there's quite a few that I've watched because I'm trying to watch as many films as I can that are nominated for an Oscar this year. So I'm not entirely there yet, but I like to be prepared because I do watch the Oscars. It's something that's very interesting to me. Like I do watch the Grammys. But yeah, so if you're interested in those reviews, then let's get into it. The first film we're going to be talking about is called One Battle After Another, and it was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And in this film, you have Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Chase Infinity, and Tiana Taylor. This movie is about when their evil nemesis resurfaces after 16 years, a band of ex-revolutionaries reunite to rescue the daughter of one of their own. So for this film, at first, when I saw the trailer in theater, I was not very much excited about it. Like there was something off about it, and I'm not a very fond person of Leonardo DiCaprio in the first place. As a man who dates very young girls, I do not make a separation between an artist and who they are, even though we don't really know who they are because they're celebrities and Leonardo is really someone very private, but still, not very fond of Leo DiCap. So I wasn't very excited to go see this film, but I did anyways because I saw that it was nominated in quite a few categories at the Oscars and also at a bunch of other ceremonies like Actors Academy, blah, blah, blah. Tons of other ceremonies like Golden Globes, Emmys, all of it. So I was like, okay, maybe I should watch it. And I did. And surprisingly, like I do watch Leo DiCap's films, not all of them. Like last year I watched hold on, what was it called? Oh my god. Oh yeah. Killers of the Flower Moon, and it was a very long movie that was 206 minutes, and the time literally flew by. And I feel like that film, Leo really has a great performance in it. Like, don't necessarily like the character, but have to admit that he's a great actor. That's the only thing. But, every time there's a film and that he's in it, I'm kind of like, ugh, what is this one going to be about? But I'm mostly surprised most times. So, yes, I did go and see One Battle After Another, and it was really good. Like, I had a great time watching it. I was not bored one bit, and the time did also flew by. So overall, One Battle After Another is mainly a film that captures the emotional persistence of conflict. The idea that life's struggles rarely come as a single challenge, but as a sequence of obstacles. It really makes the film raw and honest, and I feel like it was done in a very smart way because the revolutionaries are mostly represented by minorities. And it's a fact in our society today, minorities are the ones to struggle in life. And I don't think it would have made sense if it was like a bunch of whiteys fighting against one another. You know, like specifically if you're a white man, a white cis man, I don't think you've ever had to struggle in our society because society was built for you. Like just recently, I just learned by reading an article that you know how they tested the safety things in the car, like your seatbelt, your airbag, like how everything is supposed to be positioned. It was tested on a man mannequin. Like, so if you ever get in a car accident, those safety things that activate to protect you were meant to protect men, because all of these were tested on man mannequins. It was never made for women, and not even pregnant women. Oh, and also, you know how they recommend you to sleep between 7 to 8 hours a night? Those studies were only made on men. So women actually do need a lot more sleep than men. All of those simple things, everything you probably know as of today, everything is built in society to be practical for men. That's crazy. It really pisses me off. Like every time I read an article about this, it's like, I'm pissed, but am I surprised? No. Like to this point, I am not. I could go really on and on about this, but it's not the subject here. We're here to talk about one battle after another. And it's a really great title because it really is one battle after another, you know, in life too, how we women have to keep fighting for our rights, to keep our rights, and to have a little bit more equality to men. Like, I don't think women should be above men. Like, I don't think anybody should be above anybody to this point. I think everybody should be equal and treated as equals. You know, that's the fucking bare minimum. And in this film, it's really that is really one battle after another. You know, they fight for one thing at the beginning of the film, which was mainly about fighting consumerism and capitalism and to stop giving everything to the rich and just spread everything to everyone. And then you have Tiana Taylor's character who gets pregnant. And then when she has her baby, she has to fight postpartum depression and also the fact that now as a mother, she doesn't feel like she is as close to her baby as she should be. So she's also fighting that feeling because she should feel close to her baby and like as her mom, you know, but it's a thing that happens to mothers, to some of them. And so does postpartum depression or prepartum depression too. That works. So yeah, she has to fight and find a balance between, like, do I want to go back to who I was before I became a mom? Can I balance the two? Can I be a mom, but can I also be an activist? What can I do? Because when I'm an activist, I'm putting myself in danger. And so by all means, I'm putting my daughter in danger. But I also want to put myself first because she realized that, you know, she wasn't exactly ready to be a mom. And she didn't want to be dependent on someone, on a child, you know? And I feel like that also might be the case for a lot of women that just ends up being pregnant and they just decide to keep it. And for some of them it works, and for others it doesn't. And so she has to fight that. And then she has to fight Sean Penn's character, Lockjaw, a total fucking psycho who fell in love with Tiana Taylor's character, thinks he's the father of her child when it's actually Leonardo DiCaprio's child. So she has to fight multiple battles. A little fast forward to 16 years later, Lockjaw still holds a grudge against Tiana Taylor's character. So he goes after her daughter. And oh my God, that just made me think about 50 Cent and his grudges against Dee Dee and Jay-Z. And his comment that, made me laugh so hard was like, okay, I'm watching all of these videos and I'm realizing that I'm not hating to my full potential because 50 Cent is hating Diddy to the point that he made a documentary against that dude. And I mean, to be fair, thank you, 50 Cent. Thank you for the extra material that you had. But like, God, like, I keep seeing videos of 50 Cent, like, interviews when the docu was coming out, and be like, who's your favorite villain? And he said, with a big smile on his face, probably Diddy. And it's just so funny because dude has been holding a grudge for I don't know how many years. Legit though, because we all know what went down with Diddy, and he's doing us a favor. But God, yeah, it just made me think about 50 Cent as I was talking about Lockjaw, because the grudges are very different. Like, 50 Cent holds a grudge for a good reason. Lockjaw is an asshole, full of himself and blinded by hatred. But, the film in itself, through its different characters, and mainly the ones of Lockjaw, played by Sean Penn, Tiana Taylor's, and Leonardo DiCaprio's character, you really see how these characters evolve through cumulative pressures. They've had one, in parenthesis, successful battle, but then another one hits them right in the face. So it really shows how you have to be resilient to whatever is put on your path that you will have to face. It also shows their vulnerability throughout these battles that they have to fight. And also it shows a little bit of moral ambiguity specifically with Lockjaw and Tiana Taylor's character's struggles with motherhood. So, it's a whole spectrum. Everybody's life is different from one another, but we all struggle with one thing, and we all have to fight one battle after another. Some more than others, of course, because we weren't all given the same start with life. So each and everyone's battles are different. And the variety of characters shows that sort of, spectrum. They also show the spectrum, the part of the spectrum where some people have never struggled in their lives. Because there's one point in the film where Lockjaw meets a club, in parenthesis, a club full of white rich men that sort of control society and whatever is going on. You know, like they have access to a bunch of different things that the normal citizen would not have access to. And they show how, you know, they can just test someone and then they either kill that person or bring that person into the club because no one is supposed to know about this club. So if you're not selected, you are to be killed. At least they showed one aspect of that through Lockjaw. So I guess it would be a weakness, but it's also, I feel like, where the viewer has to come in and use their critical thinking skills and be like, they're talking about the whole spectrum, you know, but there's so many layers to that spectrum, and they only choose a few to represent in this film because they didn't have time to represent everybody. And the character development doesn't feel drastic. It feels transformative and gradual. Like, you know, it could have been so drastic from the first part of the movie where it happens in, I don't know what year, and then the other half of the movie where it takes place 16 years later. You know, that change, those characters could have changed very drastically, but they didn't. So it's a very good strength. Like, it gives a more nuanced and psychologically grounded portrayal, I feel like. The cinematography was beautiful. Like, it was a beautiful film to watch. It reinforced the film's thematic tension by using framing, you know, and visual composition to emphasize isolation and pressure on the characters. You know, there's also like some tight framings and controlled camera movement that kind of visually mirror the characters' psychological battles. And I thought that that was like such a smart move. Like, you know, it really extended the film. It extended its narrative conflict visually. And I just love when framing work comes in and adds on top of dialogue, character development, thematics, cinematography, narrative, the whole thing. I love it when everything just fits together and become whole. It's so satisfying to see it, and like the moment you realize it, you're like, oh, like it actively takes something in my brain where I'm like, oh, this is it. I just saw this and that happened before and now it's happening again. And when you see it, I don't know, maybe I'm a nerd when it comes to that, but I love it so much when you realize this. Like, you realize the camera work is mirroring whatever the character is fighting at one point in the film. Another one that I'm thinking of that does this kind of work was Insidious 5, The Red Door. Patrick Wilson did an absolute amazing job with the camera work. Stunning. And it's a horror film, so I love it when it's like psychological and then the camera sort of like moves accordingly. Ugh, I love it. I don't particularly have anything to say about the pacing because I feel like it was pretty much very well toned. But there's one thing about this film that, you know, maybe audiences wouldn't have liked very much was that it is absolutely 2 hours and a half of conflict. You're never taking a break from conflict. And so this being a constant conflict, it can become a lot for people. Some people need a break, a breath of fresh air from the conflict. Even though conflict is very much part of a very basic storyline, I can get why maybe for some people it might have been too much. That I can understand. But overall, the political themes, the key angle of this film, the style of Paul Thomas Anderson, the acting, the pacing, the narrative, all of it, I highly gave it, I think, 4 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. How much? Yeah. 4 stars out of 5. Pretty decent, I would say. I mean, it's not hard for me to give a 4 out of 5 stars, like as long as I had a great time during the film. 3 stars are easily secured. I'm not hard on notes whenever I have to give it a note. Like, I've seen people on TikTok be like, oh, these are the reasons why I gave like 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so on until they get to 5. And it's like, God, what does it take for a film for you to give it 5 stars? Like, you'll never be content. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. You're like so hard to please. I'm a good viewer, I believe. I enjoy myself a lot whenever I watch a film, and there's a few films that I haven't enjoyed, and you can probably count them on my 2 hands. It's like whenever I'm reading a book. If I had a great time, it's at least 3 stars. I don't know. We're just all so different, and I'm kind of being judgmental right now, but you're asking for it. Like, I don't know. Some people just are so hard at ranking movies. It's like, I'm easily entertained and I'm easily enjoying myself in front of a film, but I'm not being hard on a film review just because I want to seem like a purist and like I can't enjoy shit. You know what I mean? Like, you make it seem like you can't enjoy shit. Like, I would never want to watch a movie with those person. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I would never watch a movie with those people. Never. Okay? But moving on to another movie. This one is not nominated at the Oscars, but it's Greenland 2, Migration. And this movie is the sequel from the first film, Greenland, that came out in 2020. And it was directed by Rick Roman Vaughn. I don't know if I pronounced this right. It's with Gerald Butler and Morena Baccarin. Also, hope I pronounced this right. But this movie is about having found the safety of the Greenland bunker after the comet Clark decimated the Earth. The Garrity family must now risk everything to embark on a perilous journey across the wasteland of Europe to find a new home. I had really enjoyed the first one. I love a good sci-fi, end of the world kind of movie. I loved the TV show The 100, so you had to know that this was the perfect film for me. It actually made me want to watch The 100 again, but I will not put myself through that. Anyways, I didn't know that they had put out another one until like one afternoon my boyfriend and I are looking for a film to watch in theaters, and I'm scrolling through the program, and all of a sudden I'm seeing Greenland too. And I'm like, what? Like, are they doing like, screenings of the 2020 film? Like my theater does that where they reprogram films from the past few years. And it's like, no, it's this 2 Migration. What is this? I had not heard about it one bit. And 2 weeks prior, I had shown the film Greenland to my boyfriend, and he had actually liked it. And so I was like, hold on, let's go and see the second one. You've seen the first one not so long ago, so that's great. And I never thought that they would do a second one, and I'm really... It's really hard sometimes to do sequels about these end of the world movies, because it's like, I thought it was the end. I thought there was no one left on Earth, but there actually were, and they sort of went with the grounders route that the 100 went with. And so it was really interesting to see how they were going to go. Like, were they going to do something like the 20 days, hours, years later kind of saga? Franchise? Do we talk about sagas anymore? I feel like that's dedicated to Harry Potter, Because even when you're talking about the Hunger Games, you're talking about the Hunger Games franchise. Do you say saga after 5 films? Because we say the Twilight Saga. There's 5 films. Harry Potter Saga. There's 8 films. I don't know. That's a question. I should look that up later, but I'm not here to talk about that. Anyways, I feel like there's just so much disaster subgenre movies that, kind of feel creatively exhausted because it's been done so many times through movies, TV shows, books, all of it. And they're all about the same thing and sort of all end the same way. So it was kind of a pleasant surprise to see the route Greenland 2 Migration took. The performances were pretty solid, and there was quite a few tense moments where I thought, okay, this is it. This is the end of it. And I think why this film sort of works is because it took the sacrificing one of the main characters' route, a character you are deeply attached to, which was Jared Butler's character. And usually in these films all the main characters survive, and it's the supporting characters that sort of die. But no, they really went with that storyline where the main character has difficulties breathing. So you might think okay, he's not gonna live until he's 90 years old, but he's gonna have a good life. And then everything just goes unexpected, and they sort of make you think that he's somehow going to survive. And then at the last bit, he doesn't. I was bawling my eyes out. And it doesn't take a lot for me to bawl my eyes out, but still, I was so sad. But I feel like that was very much needed for that sequel to work and to feel satisfied, to make you think like, oh, they did not do a sequel for nothing. Overall, I was not expecting a lot from this film. I try not to, because if your expectations are high from the beginning, you're obviously going to end up disappointed. And so I didn't want that. And so as the first one had wrapped up everything pretty neatly, and I never expected a follow-up, the change of scenery, the very small but effective twist in the plot made it feel very fresh, kind of like a new film, And I feel like if they were to do a sequel, and they did, but, if I ever thought that they would have done a sequel, I feel like that would have been something I would have imagined them going into, if that makes sense. I also feel like this one is really focusing on, how there's a lot of bunkers around the world, and how, every disaster film makes you think that, oh yeah, they end up in the bunker and then happily ever after they'll die in there, But with this one, they go with the situation where the bunker just can't hold up and can't last forever. So it was just a solution for a small portion of time. But, at one point you're going to have to find a solution, because even though bunkers are underground, earthquakes and environmental chaos can make the bunker fall down on its own and become uninhabitable, And I really liked the fact that they went to Europe and that their final destination was France, because I'm from France. And I loved to see an actor that has been in Gossip Girl and Emily in Paris. And this actor is named William Abadi. And when I saw him, I was like, oh, that gif of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street? That one? That was me in theaters when I saw him. I was like, I know this guy. He's from Gossip Girl. He plays Blair's stepfather. But anyways, the film's CGI was pretty solid, Everything looked very convincing. The scale of destructions, devastated environments, even this specific scene where I believe they used a lot of CGI is the one where they have to cross over an abyss, sort of, that got created because of Clark. And, this meteor sort of changed the aspect of Earth and how people knew it. And so that part where there's a lot of depth and void and wind and stones, all of it, it really, like, to this day, I question how, I know it's CGI, but I just can't prove it because it's so well done. And so in an era where CGI has been overly used and not in a great way, it didn't make the environments feel real. You could see that it was made up. Here it blends absolutely well. The pacing is very strong. Like everything moves very briskly and nothing ever stays the same too long. And the atmosphere also, it almost feels haunting, because of how everything looked so devastated and abandoned. One thing that was notably different for me from the first one was that this second one was a lot more brutal than the first one. We have one brutal scene at one point with an actor that I think everybody discovered on Vine, and he gets killed because he gets knocked in the head with a hammer. But in this one, you are attaching yourself to supporting characters, and they die very quickly and very brutally. It kind of felt like The Walking Dead. Like the one thing everybody tells you before you start watching The Walking Dead is do not get attached to anybody. I feel like that could have been a very good warning about this film. It's like, don't get attached in no way whatsoever. So overall, it is a very good disaster sequel that delivers exactly what you would want it to deliver. It doesn't disappoint. It doesn't overdo it. It just does it right. And it's very watchable and enjoyable if you don't expect too much from it. Like, stay on the ground a little bit with us right here. The performances are solid, like I've said. The tension is there. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Shit's about to go down, but you don't know exactly when. So they kind of sort of play with the seconds and how and when they happened. Kind of like in the horror genre where you're like expecting a screamer at this exact second because 3 seconds passed, but it doesn't happen. It happens like 2 or 3 seconds later. This is kind of like that with the tension and how everything happens. It's enjoyable. You're going to have a good time watching this film if you like disaster films. It's pretty solid in its own genre. It's not the movie of the year, but it's pretty good. I liked it. I don't know how many stars I gave it. Oh, I gave it 5. I had a great time. I laughed. I cried. I panicked. All of it. I was living the movie when I was watching it. So to me, it was a pretty solid film. Would I give it 5 stars now? Probably not. Maybe a good 3.5. Maybe I overdid it. Definitely overdid it. But that is in the spawn of the moment. Whenever I rate a movie on Letterboxd, it's in the spawn of the moment. Because I usually rate it right as I walk out of the theater. So I'm like kind of on the cloud 9, feeling like it can take on the entire world. I usually never go back and watch my scores again. But right now I just have to because I'm reading the synopses out of Letterboxd. And so I'm checking my diary entries. And now my diary entry is saying that Hamlet is the next film we're going to be talking about. It is a movie about the powerful story of love and loss that inspired the creation of Shakespeare's timeless masterpiece, Hamlet. And it was directed by Chloe Zhao. In the cast, you have Jessie Buckley, Paul Mescal, Emily Watson, Joe Alwyn, Jacoby Jupe, Noah Jupe. Wait, is that his little brother? And younger brother of actor Noah Jupe. What? I didn't know that. Noah Jupe, if you were not familiar with this actor. He was playing Emily Blunt's and John Krasinski's child in the film's A Quiet Place. He's their kiddo. What the heck? I didn't know he had a little brother, and they absolutely do not look alike. One is brown haired and the other one is blonde haired. What the hell? Okay, never mind. Moving on. And he's British. Oh, I could have never guessed that. He's British? No way. Ugh. Okay, great discovery. But, okay. Centering myself now. Whew. Talking about the film. Hamlet. What a beautiful, devastating film. Oof. I am all for Jessie Buckley winning all the nominations that she had with this performance. It is crazy. I was literally like, my jaw was on the floor by the end of the movie because of her performance and how raw it is. Devastatingly raw. See, I am not familiar with a lot of Shakespeare's work. I'm only familiar with Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth. These are the only stories that I'm familiar with. And I hadn't seen the trailer for this film before watching it. So everything was a complete discovery and surprise. I knew that it was sort of inspired by a story written by William Shakespeare because I had heard about Hamlet, but I wasn't familiar with it. So as the film was progressing, I was like, hold on, this dude is going to London and writing stories, and what is this? Is this Shakespeare? And then towards the end, they showed the Shakespeare Globe Theater. And I was like, hold on. Is this whole time, has this been a story inspired by Shakespeare's stories? So Paul Mescal is playing Shakespeare. And then Jessie Buckley is playing his wife. And is this a story about his two kids? Stunned. I was out. And I see this is the only few times where I'm very happy not to have watched the trailers, because then I get to be fully surprised, and then it gets to click at some point in the film. And I'm like, oh, all of this makes so much sense now. And I don't know, it tickles something in my brain. But anyways, the emotional intimacy and perspective in this film was one of its greatest strengths. Particularly through its focus on grief and family life rather than the public legacy of William Shakespeare. Like in this film, William Shakespeare, played by Paul Mescal, is almost absent. Like, he's not part of the main focus. His wife is, and their two kids. And so by centering the story on the domestic and emotional world surrounding the loss of Hamlet, the narrative sort of really humanizes historical figures who we treat as distant people. You know, like, it's hard to picture historical figures like we see our figures from our time. You know, there's a different perception between how I picture William Shakespeare and his wife and how I picture now Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift, because I'm living at the same time as them. So it's kind of hard to have this not parasocial relationship, if we can call it that. I hate that word because I don't think there should be any parasocial relationship. To me, that's just sort of like toxic. But you can't have that with historical figures. And so when it's being portrayed and played out in a film, it's a lot easier to feel an emotional proximity towards these figures, I feel like. And the approach of the film, which was to explore mourning, memory, and parental love, makes the story resonate on an even more deeply personal level. And losing a child and grief does speak to a lot of people. Just like also the family dynamic of having a father that's absent and working in another city. And in that way, he can't be as present as he would want to be because he's the breeder of the family. And so you only have a very proximity with the mother. And so you feel for her on a very deep level when she loses her child. And that's something that I was thinking about when the whole thing was playing out in front of me when I was watching the film, is I felt a lot more empathy towards the character of Jessie Buckley, who plays the mom who lost her child, than I did for Paul Mescal's character, who was very much absent and not there. Not that he doesn't deserve or doesn't feel grief just because he wasn't there and working. He actually shows it through Hamlet, and I feel like that's something his wife was feeling, that he wasn't feeling grief in the way that he should have, kind of like her. But, you know, it's also a very good reflection on how everybody experiences grief differently. You know, in this film, the mother lets out the whole thing, you know, whereas William sort of kept everything to himself and poured it into a play and then played the play in front of thousands of people. And that's how he grieved and how he was able to go on and still live, even though he lost his child. He found a way to make his child live forever in a work of art, and he made him known to everybody in a way that he would have wanted him to be known. Because, you know, Hamlet had such a short life that, you know, you could imagine that if he had had a bigger one, a lot more people would have known him. And so William incorporated his character and turned it into a play. And I thought that that was very beautiful. Another strength the movie has is the atmosphere and the sort of visual storytelling in order to convey emotions. There are natural landscapes, period details. There's also a mirroring effect between the rhythm of the 16th century rural life and the characters' internal states. So they use a lot of visual symbolism and quiet moments. It's not about over exposition. They really created a tone that really enhanced the film's emotional depth and immersive quality, if that makes sense. Overall, I think this film was really great in the way that it really reimagines or just simply imagines how the death of William Shakespeare's and Anne or Agnes Hathaway's only son might have inspired the creation of what is said to be Shakespeare's greatest tragedy, because it is simply the most gut-wrenching story I've ever seen in a while. Like, you have to be armed emotionally to handle Jessie Buckley's performance. Like, I don't think I was ready. And God, was I tearing up so bad. Like, the last half of the movie is just, so hard to watch. And I also thought that it was very beautiful to see how, they had twins and that at birth, one hadn't survived and it was the daughter. And so the mother was focusing so much on the daughter that she not dismissed her son in a way, but she knew that he could handle things. And so for her to lose her son instead of her daughter, because her son wanted his sister to survive and sort of sacrificed himself for his sister to live. Gut-wrenching. Gut-wrenching. I highly recommend this film. Like, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and I've seen that Jessie Buckley's has won a few of her nominations besides the Oscar nominations, and so well deserved. So well deserved. It was one of my favorites of last year. And I gave this one 5 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. Obviously, no questions needs to be asked, really. Another one that I have seen recently is called Nuremberg, and it was directed by James Vanderbilt, starring Russell Crowe, Rami Malek, Michael Shannon, Leo Woodell, John Slattery, Richard E. Grant, Colin Hanks, Mark O'Brien, ton of people. And it is about post-war Germany. An American psychiatrist must determine whether Nazi prisoners are fit to go on trial for war crimes, and finds himself in a complex battle of intellect and ethics with Hermann Göring, Hitler's right-hand man. This movie was devastating as well, in a very different way from Hamlet. Hamlet really based on grief and family dynamics in the 16th century. Here we're focusing on war crimes and how Nazis have committed a lot of them. And here we are mainly focusing on how they built the Nuremberg trials. And this movie is just so gripping with the atmosphere, the script, the importance of these trials post-war, the weight of those crimes, and how were they gonna judge these people? And mainly the question answered by the psychiatrist is how different those people are from, regular people. And turns out they're actually just regular people with very extreme political views. And they were ready to erase an entire population. And it's crazy to think about it. And when I think about those crimes, I also think about how there's some people today in 2026 that are saying that the Holocaust never happened. How can you say something never happened when it's been documented? There's thousands of videos, thousands of pictures. There's receipts, dudes, receipts. There's sites that still exist to this day to remember that this happened, and that is something that we can never do again. Like, how can you wake up in the morning, get up, and go on national radio, TV, and be like, no, these never happened? Huh? Like, how can you look at yourself in the mirror? I know I wouldn't be able to. And it's just, I don't understand that. And so I feel like to this day, it's really important to keep doing these movies and keep reminding those people that, that happened. And you can't have somebody that decided to say that all of this never happened. Because I feel like if we weren't doing these movies and that we weren't constantly, talking about it and reminding people, I feel like some political people would actually be able to manipulate citizens into thinking that this never happened because people forgot about them. And it's just also something that we can't forget about because of all the people that sacrificed their lives, who fought for these people to be able to be free again. And just also a reminder to never fall that low, ever. And to not fall for the strategy that the psychiatrist really points out is why the Nazis succeeded in what they did, is that they chose one enemy. And then they decided to put everything that was wrong onto those people and to blame them for it. Have a common enemy, make people agree with you, because some people are not clever enough to educate themselves and see the whole spectrum, that they actually believed this and what they said. And then whenever people realized that all of this was bullshit, it was already too late. They were already high in power and already doing whatever the plan was. And that is so sad. And it's I feel something that is very, it is something that echoes to a lot of what happens these days in politics is like, as a person who did studies in journalism, I'll never proclaim myself to be a journalist, but I studied journalism and I know how this works. I know that every article, every report, every documentary has an angle. Everything has an angle. So when an article is being written or when a report is being made, they choose one angle out of the whole spectrum of the news. So then they write accordingly to that angle that they chose. They won't write against it. And that's why when I was studying those things and how you write an article, that I decided that the last thing I would want to do if I was a journalist writing news articles, I would never be able to live with myself if I were to write just one angle about one news. Because as a journalist, you're here to report about the whole spectrum of one specific news. You're here to tell the audience or the readers about all the facts regarding one news and not just one part of it. And this is where the media nowadays can manipulate people, manipulate citizens who only watch or read one media because they will put their faith and trust into that media and base their knowledge and education, in a way, only on this specific media. But if you read multiple medias from, that have, different political views, center, far right, far left, left, right, whatever, you will get your whole spectrum about that one specific news. But you shouldn't be. If I'm talking about a news, I want to talk about the whole thing. I don't want to lie to people. And it's not even considered lying because it's just telling about one angle and it's just not talking about the other. If you're not talking about it, you're just not lying. But it's just easier to manipulate the truth. And that's why I don't necessarily trust medias these days. I don't trust anything that is being said because it is so easily manipulated with the angle that they chose for the report or the news or the editing. Because nowadays everything is edited. Everything is a montage. A lot of things are being taken out. And this, my friends, makes a lot of sense because one of the prisoners that they had arrested and that was judged at the Nuremberg trials was a head of a media that used his journal to incorporate propaganda. It all starts there. It just makes sense. It all starts there. You just have to manipulate the public opinion. They're just really good, manipulative people. And I remember at school when we were kids, we were taught about World War I and World War II. And for World War II, we talked about the Nuremberg trials, but we never got into the depth and details of it. And so that's why I liked this movie, because it was sort of a new subject and with a very specific perspective, the perspective of the psychologist played by Rami Malek. And I thought that that was a very toned and interesting take on the Nuremberg trials. And the film is 2 hours and a half long. So if it's not well paced, a war movie that is 2 hours and a half long can feel very long. You can feel those 2.5 hours. But with this one, the pacing was really great. Like, I really did not see the time pass. Thanks to the pacing, of course, but also the structure of the storyline, the performances that were really solid by Rami Malek, Russell Crowe, and Leah Woodwill. Like, Russell Crowe as Hitler's right-hand man was absolutely disturbing to watch. He was disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And that's when you know an actor is playing really well, is when you know, Russell Crowe is a very known actor. And, you know, sometimes you might see those very known actors as who they are, which here you could be like, oh, this is just Russell Crowe. No, he is so good at playing this asshole that you're disgusted by him. And you don't even see Russell Crowe. You literally see the guy he's playing. And that's when you know the acting was good and well done. And, you know, at times when Rami Malek was, you know, sort of playing pretend friend and friend with this German Nazi, you question yourself and you're like, are you actually being friends with him? Or is this all part of the manipulation plan that you have for them to trust you? And in that way, when they trust you, they tell you things, you know, and that way you can help people judge them and you can figure out if they're fucked up in the head, you know, that there's something that was missed at birth or when their front lobe developed. And it's like, no, there's just people like you and I, which is crazy to think. And I thought that choosing this angle for this movie to sort of humanize Nazis, because that's what they were in the end, humans with very, 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 very extreme political views, of course. But I thought that that was an interesting take. Not a take that we have seen a lot. And that definitely adds to the atmosphere, to the plot. That was a very bold move to make. So overall, I thought that that was a great movie because when you walk out of it and when you think about it like I am right now, you're always questioning what you saw. And you're still thinking about it and you're like probably going through a train of thought that is going to be very different from when, you know, my train of thought of when I walked out of the theater and then my train of thought now. So it's so, for me, a good movie is a movie that you'll think about after. in a good way, because a movie you didn't like, you don't necessarily think about it. You might think about it when someone is asking you the question of like, what's the movie you didn't like? Then you'll think about it. But for this one, you're constantly thinking about it because of the relevance and the ideology that might resonate to this day, and how neo-Nazis have resurfaced, and that how they're not ashamed to have those political views. It really focuses on the complex historical event by engaging psychological and moral drama. And it really makes the audiences reflect on the questions of how much a person is responsible for a crime this big and this massive. It makes you question how an ideology can destroy a nation, and how justice works, specifically here in the aftermath of World War II. But these Nuremberg trials really set the legal and moral foundations of international justice. And so to have a movie that sort of depicts them, illustrates them, uses real footage, is really a narrative that is both educational and has an ethical weight. Do you know what I mean? Like, focusing on those courtroom exchanges and also those personal dynamics between, prosecutors and defendants. It talks about World War II in a way that has not been talked about before. Because when you think about movies about World War II, you can think about Saving Private Ryan. You can think of, I don't know, those kinds of movies. I can't think of them now at the top of my head, but there's tons of movies that talk about World War II. But they always talk about the fights and the soldiers that are fighting and that are being killed. They talk about this. Here, they really talk and focus on the ones who declared World War II and their crimes, and like how much and like how much are they involved in those crimes, and to what extent can you judge them based on the law, the international law that did not exist at the time? Like, how do you judge those people? To what extent can you judge them? Because this has never happened before. And fingers crossed, it's never going to happen again. But, this is the really psychological part of World War II that had not been explored before and that I really liked. And one, I feel like that is more impactful than, a usual war movie. Not that Saving Private Ryan was not impactful. It was. Because everybody ended up being killed except Private Ryan. So, like, all those people died for one person. I was crying for 3.5 hours straight. Thank you, Steven Spielberg. I know you love your war movies, but God, do they destroy me mentally. Thank you very much. But yeah, I would really recommend you to watch Nuremberg. It's a very interesting take, and you will not see the time fly. Like, literally, my boyfriend is not interested usually in war movies, but in this one, he was so interested, and so, like, it has a grip on you when you're watching it. Because there's so many things that you are questioning during this movie. And yeah, it's just so interesting. I have to make my parents watch this movie. But yeah, highly recommend. 10 out of 10. I gave this 5 stars on Letterboxd, I believe. That is entirely for sure. Do I even need to check it? Oh no, I gave it 4. Why 4? I thought I gave it 5. Whatever. I think I might stop this episode now. I wanted to talk about a lot more movies than what I just did, but I feel like this episode is already 1 hour and 16 minutes long. And if I continue, it's going to be 2 hours long. So I'll do a part 2 that I'll post next week. Because I still have to talk about Wuthering Heights, Marty Supreme, and Scream 7. And I'll probably go see a few other movies during the week. So maybe I'll talk about those 2. I have to see The Bride. I rambled a lot in this episode because, I don't know, films make me think a lot about things like society in general, relationships, psychology, moral values, lots of things, historical facts. Yeah, from one movie, I can think about a lot of things, truly, and I can lose myself in it a lot, which is why this episode is edited. And yeah, see, everything is edited, even this, but it's mostly just to cut out my nonsense, and because I'm rambling so much that I lose myself in a subject, like I am right now, because I'm only supposed to be doing the outro, and I'm still rambling and rambling and rambling. Apologies. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. If you have, thank you for the support. It really means a lot to me. I love doing this. So I hope to see you guys next week. This was your host, Florin, and bye.